My name is Ashley Monroe. I was 32 years old on the night of our 5th wedding anniversary when I walked into the most expensive restaurant in the city and found my husband sitting with another woman. I had dressed carefully that evening. I wore the navy dress Marcus once said made me look like someone worth keeping. My heels were polished. My lipstick was dark and even. I had stopped at the florist on the way and bought a small card I planned to slip into his jacket pocket. It read, 5 years. And I would choose you again. I never gave him that card. I remember the piano music. I remember the host smiling at me when I said I had a reservation under Monroe. I remember walking toward the back of the room and stopping. Marcus was in the corner booth, the one we had used on our very first date. His jacket was pressed. He was laughing at something the woman beside him said. She had long amber hair and a red dress that cost more than our monthly groceries. I stopped walking. Everything went still. Not spinning. Not crashing. Still, the way a photograph is still. Then Marcus looked up and saw me standing there. His face didn't show guilt. It showed irritation. He didn't stand. He didn't wave me over. He leaned toward the woman and said something low, and she turned to look at me. Her expression was calm, almost curious. I walked toward the table. I didn't know why my legs kept moving, but they did. Ashley, Marcus said, his voice flat. What are you doing here? It's our anniversary, I replied. He sighed like that was a minor detail he had forgotten to deal with. Then he straightened and said the words I still hear sometimes when the house goes quiet at night. I want you to meet someone. He gestured toward the woman. This is Vivian. She's the future of my life. The future of his life. I stood there holding my clutch bag, the little card still inside it, and I looked at Vivian. She looked back without blinking. Not embarrassed. Not sorry. Just waiting to see what I would do. Marcus tilted his head. Don't make this messy, Ashley. You'll only embarrass yourself. Around us, heads were turning. Forks pausing. Conversations dropping to whispers. Everyone was watching. I could feel the heat of every eye in that room pressed against my back like a hand. And I made a decision. I pulled out the empty chair across from them both and sat down. Not dramatically. Not with shaking hands. I sat the way you sit when you belong somewhere. I smoothed my dress, placed my bag on my lap, and looked directly at Vivian. How long? I asked. She blinked. How long have the two of you been together? I said again, my voice easy, as if asking about the weather. She glanced at Marcus. He gave a small nod. Answer her. She'll be gone soon. 6 months, Vivian said. There was a confidence in her voice she didn't bother to hide. 6 months. I nodded slowly, pressing my fingers together beneath the table. 6 months ago was the exact week Marcus had come home looking tired and worried. He had sat on the edge of our bed and taken my hand. He had told me his company was failing and he needed a loan. He had looked me in the eyes the way he used to when I believed everything he said. I had believed him. I had given him the money. I smiled once at them both, stood, excused myself quietly, and walked out into the cold night air. I didn't cry at the restaurant. I didn't raise my voice or throw anything, even though I understood in that moment why people in films sometimes did. I walked to my car 2 blocks away, heels clicking slowly against the pavement, the anniversary card still in my bag. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the steering wheel for a long moment. Then I opened my phone. Not to call anyone. Not to text Marcus. I opened the Notes app, the one with the small lock icon I had titled, very simply, Everything. It was a long document. Months in the making. There were dates going back nearly a year. Transaction records, screenshots, names, amounts, and locations. Photographs taken carefully. Files saved without telling a soul. I scrolled through it slowly in the dark. My hands were not shaking. 6 months ago Marcus had asked me for money, and I had given it. But I had also, quietly, without a word, started paying close attention to everything around us. I had suspected this was bigger than cheating. I just hadn't yet known how much bigger. What I held in my phone was 12 months of careful proof. And I was not finished with it yet. It had started 11 months earlier, on a Tuesday evening in October. Marcus had always worked late. He ran a mid-sized property consulting firm, Monroe and Associates, and long hours came with that life. I had never been the kind of wife who called repeatedly or tracked his location. I trusted him. But that October Tuesday, something small shifted. I woke at midnight to find his side empty and cold. One message: still at the office. Don't wait up. I wasn't suspicious. I just couldn't sleep. I went downstairs to make tea, and while the kettle boiled, I picked up his iPad from the counter to find a recipe. His email was open. The message at the top of the inbox was from a name I didn't recognize, V. Calder, with a subject line that read, "Tonight was perfect." I set the iPad down. I finished my tea and went back upstairs. But I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark thinking about those 3 words. Something quiet and careful began to wake up inside me. Not panic, not anger, just attention. From that night forward, I paid attention to everything. Every charge, every name, every excuse. I paid attention the way someone pays attention when they already know, somewhere wordless, that something is very wrong. I didn't confront Marcus the next morning. I didn't mention the email. I made us coffee, kissed him at the door, and watched his car pull away. Then I sat at the kitchen table and thought clearly about what I wanted to do. I had 2 choices. I could ask him directly and receive whatever version of the truth he decided to give me. Or I could find out fully on my own before saying a single word. I chose the second option. Over the following weeks, I noticed things I had trained myself not to see. Charges for restaurants I had never visited. An overnight coastal trip for a client meeting that produced nothing. A new cologne I hadn't bought. Small things, meaningless individually. Together they told a clear story. I started keeping notes, dates, amounts, details. I photographed bank statements on days he left them on his desk. I checked public property records connected to his business. I didn't hack anything. I broke no laws. I simply watched what was already visible and wrote it down. By the time Marcus came to me with the loan story, I already had 2 months of records quietly waiting. I gave him the money anyway, because I needed to see exactly where it went. The amount Marcus asked for was $45,000. He was careful about how he framed it. He chose a Sunday evening after a quiet dinner, when I was relaxed. He held my hand the way he used to early in our marriage. His eyes were soft and worried in a way that had always made me want to help him. He said his biggest client had pulled from 3 contracts at once. Payroll was at risk. He needed a short bridge loan, just 2 months, and things would recover. He promised to repay me before the year ended. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about V. Calder's email, the coastal trip, 8 weeks of notes in my phone. "I trust you," I said. I transferred the money the following morning from my personal savings account, not our joint one. An account he had no access to, built quietly over years. Then I called my bank and set up a trace notification on his receiving account. Most people didn't know this feature existed. Every time a significant withdrawal was made, I received a text. The first notification arrived 4 days later. A hotel, downtown, 2 nights. The hotel was called the Alderton. Dark wood paneling, white linen, a rooftop bar that charged $30 a glass. I had driven past it many times but never needed to go inside. I didn't go now either. I didn't need to. The notification gave me the amount. I cross-referenced the date against Marcus's calendar. He had marked that weekend as a regional developers conference. I searched for that conference. It did not exist. I added the entry to my notes. More notifications followed over the coming weeks. A jewelry store on 5th Avenue. A car rental on a weekend. Marcus claimed he was visiting his college friend Patrick upstate. Patrick had moved to Portugal 2 years earlier. Each notification was one piece. Each piece fit cleanly beside the last. But what I was assembling was not just evidence of an affair. The money wasn't going to a struggling business. It wasn't covering payroll or client costs. It was funding, systematically and deliberately, an entire second life. I was not simply a betrayed wife. I was a financial victim. That distinction mattered enormously. As I came to understand the afternoon, I walked into a 14th floor office downtown, laid 43 printed pages on a desk in front of a lawyer named Patricia Osei, and began to talk. Patricia Osei had short natural hair and reading glasses she wore low on her nose. Her office was on the 14th floor downtown. I had told no one I was coming. Not my sister. Not Nadine. No one. I sat down and talked for nearly 2 hours without stopping. Patricia listened and asked sharp, precise questions. She did not seem surprised by anything I told her. When I finished, she set down her glasses and looked at me. "What you have," she said carefully, "is not just grounds for divorce. You have documented financial fraud. He obtained your funds under false pretenses and diverted money while misrepresenting the company's financial state to you as a co-signatory." I had suspected most of this. Hearing it in legal language made it real in a different way. "If we do this right," Patricia said, "he won't just lose you. He'll lose everything." I sat with that for a moment. "What do I need to do?" I asked. She smiled, small, professional, completely certain. "Exactly what you've already been doing," she said. "Keep watching. Don't change a thing." I drove home and made dinner. I set the table for two. He had absolutely no idea. I went home that evening and made the tomato pasta Marcus liked, fresh basil from the windowsill. I set the table, poured 2 glasses of water, and asked how his day was. He told me fine, and we ate together like nothing had shifted. He talked about a property deal. He complained about traffic. He asked if I had seen his charger. I found it and handed it over with a smile. He had no idea. Over the days that followed, I watched him grow more relaxed. He had been waiting for me to push back after the loan, to ask questions, notice something off. When I didn't, something in him completely unwound. He started leaving his laptop open. He took private calls in the kitchen. He mentioned Vivian's name once, casually, as someone from work, and watched my face. My face didn't move. He smiled at something private and returned to his phone. That was when I understood something important about people who deceive. They rely on your trust as their protection. Remove the trust internally while keeping the surface intact, and they stop being careful. They hand you everything without realizing it. Marcus handed me everything, and I received all of it. 3 weeks after meeting Patricia, I drove to an electronics store on the east side of the city and spent 40 minutes with a young man named Theo discussing audio recording devices. I needed something small, reliable, voice-activated, and legal to use inside my own home. Theo showed me a device the size of a pen cap. It recorded for up to 72 hours and uploaded automatically to a private cloud folder on Wi-Fi. I paid cash. That evening, while Marcus was in the shower, I placed the device on the underside of his home office desk, fixed with a strip of adhesive. His office was where he made private calls, kept company files, and conducted the real conversations of our household. I didn't feel guilty. I felt clear. The first recording arrived 2 nights later. Marcus's voice, low and relaxed, talking to Vivian for nearly an hour. I sat in my parked car at 11 at night, one earbud in, listening to my husband plan his future. He talked about timing, about waiting until things were secured. And then he said, I remember it exactly. Once everything is locked in, Ashley becomes a non-issue. A non-issue? I sent the file to Patricia immediately. Over the following 2 weeks, I collected 7 more recordings. Some were calls between Marcus and Vivian. Some were calls with Bart, his accountant. In one, they discussed what they called a restructuring plan for Monroe and Associates. Patricia translated what it actually meant. Marcus was preparing to move the company's primary assets, properties, contracts, accounts, into a new entity connected to Vivian's name. The Monroe and Associates name would remain on the surface, while the real value transferred quietly elsewhere. My name was on the original company documents as a co-investor. I had contributed to the founding capital 6 years earlier, before our marriage. That contribution was legally significant. It meant I held a documented stake in everything those assets had grown to be worth. But if Marcus completed the restructuring first, that stake would disappear. The assets would exist in the new company. My name would remain attached to the empty shell. He wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to leave me with nothing while appearing completely clean. I sat in Patricia's office and felt something cold and precise move through my chest. How long do we have? I asked. Weeks, she said. Not months. Then we move, I said. The documents arrived on a Wednesday evening. Marcus brought them home in a slim leather folder and placed them on the dining table after dinner. He explained them smoothly. Tax restructuring papers, he said. Separating certain personal and business assets for efficiency purposes. Routine. He said I just needed to sign 3 places, and he would handle everything else. He handed me the pen. I turned the pages slowly, like someone reading carefully. The language was dense and deliberately complicated. To anyone without legal guidance, it would have looked exactly like what Marcus described. But Patricia had already told me exactly what to look for. On page 7, under a clause titled Asset Transfer Authorization, my name and Marcus's appeared in a paragraph that would have signed over my co-investor rights to a newly registered company. That company was called Calder Property Group. Vivian's surname was Calder. I kept my face completely still. I clicked the pen, made 3 marks that resembled my signature closely but not precisely, and handed the pages back. All done, I said. That night I photographed every single page and sent them to Patricia. In the morning she confirmed what I already knew. Those documents would have transferred everything completely out of my name. Patricia filed an injunction the following Monday. It was a court order freezing any transfer of assets connected to Monroe and Associates until the matter could be properly reviewed. It also flagged the Calder Property Group registration for investigation, citing misuse of my co-investor funds. Marcus didn't know yet. He wouldn't know until we were ready. In the meantime, Patricia worked with a forensic accountant named Dr. Ren Adeyemi, who specialized in financial fraud inside small businesses. Dr. Adeyemi examined every record I had gathered and produced a formal report. The report documented 3 things. First, that my $45,000 had been used entirely for personal expenses with no connection to any business need. Second, that Marcus had misrepresented Monroe and Associates' financial condition to me on at least 4 documented occasions to obtain my funds. Third, that the Calder Property Group had been structured using assets I had a legal co-investor claim to, without my knowledge. When I read the final report, I was not angry. I was not sad. I was ready. Patricia looked across her desk at me. "We need one more thing," she said. "A public moment. Witnesses." I already knew exactly which room she meant. Every October, the city's property industry held its annual gala, the Meridian Awards. Black tie. 400 guests. The kind of evening where reputations were built publicly. Marcus never missed it. This year he had purchased 2 tickets through Monroe and Associates. I had seen the confirmation email during one of the weeks he left his laptop open. One in his name, one in Vivian's. He had not purchased a ticket for me. I bought my own. I called the organizing committee, explained I was a company co-founder, and asked to attend as a Monroe and Associates representative. They gave me a seat near the front. I told no one except Patricia and Nadine. Nadine had been my closest friend for 12 years. When I sat in her kitchen and told her everything, she went quiet for a full minute. Then she said, "Tell me what you need." I told her everything. She agreed to every part without hesitation. 2 weeks remained before the gala. I spent them sleeping well and staying completely calm. Marcus grew more confident each day, more certain everything was going according to his plan. He was preparing to announce his new future to an entire room. He had no idea the injunction was already filed and waiting. The night of the Meridian Awards arrived on a cool Thursday in late October. I got ready alone in the guest bathroom. I had been sleeping there for 2 weeks, using a minor back complaint as my excuse. I wore a gown bought specifically for that evening. Deep green, floor-length, structured at the shoulders. Simple. The kind of dress people remember afterward. Nadine arrived at 7, wearing black, with the quiet, focused look of someone who understood exactly what the night required. We drove separately from Marcus. He had left an hour earlier, checking his cufflinks in the hallway mirror without noticing me watching from the top of the stairs. The ballroom was already full when we arrived. Chandeliers, white flowers, a raised stage with a podium and large projection screen at the far end. I found my table 4 rows from the front and sat down. I spotted Marcus near the bar with 2 men, his back to the door. Vivian was beside him in something silver, amber hair pinned up. He hadn't seen me yet. I accepted a glass of water and waited.
My phone was in my clutch.
Every file was loaded. The evening began. The awards portion started at 9. By then, Marcus had found me across the room. I watched the exact moment, the stiffening of his posture, the way he leaned toward Vivian and said something low, the way she turned and located me. I smiled at them both.
His jaw tightened.
He turned back to his conversation, deciding I was irrelevant, that I had come to make a scene, and he would simply ignore it. That thought visibly settled him. Several awards were announced. The room applauded. Then the host stepped to the podium and announced that one of the evening's sponsors wished to make a brief address. That sponsor was Monroe and Associates. Marcus walked to the stage with easy confidence. He straightened his jacket, looked out at 400 people, and began. "I want to take this moment," he said quietly, "to talk about new beginnings." I reached into my clutch and connected my phone to the venue's presentation system. The connection had been arranged in advance through Patricia with a venue staff contact. It was authorized. The Monroe and Associates sponsorship agreement listed me as co-founder. Nadine, 2 tables over, nodded once. I stood up. The room shifted the moment I rose. Marcus stopped mid-sentence. He looked at me from the stage with an expression I had never seen on his face, something between confusion and controlled alarm. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said clearly, "but as co-founder of Monroe and Associates, I'd like to add a few things." A murmur crossed the room. The host looked uncertain, but did not step forward. My name was on the sponsorship documents. I had every right. Marcus opened his mouth, but the screen behind him had already changed. Bank transfer records filled the projection, dated, time-stamped, clearly labeled. My $45,000 leaving my account. Arriving in Monroe and Associates. Then leaving again over 6 weeks, to the Alderton Hotel, a jewelry store on 5th Avenue, a travel agency, all under one name, V. Calder. The room went completely silent. Marcus took one step forward at the podium. His mouth was open, but nothing came. I pressed the second file. His voice filled the ballroom speakers, clear and unmistakable, recorded in his own home office. Once everything is locked in, Ashley becomes a non-issue. A pause on the recording. Then Vivian's voice. "Perfect." The recording stopped. I pressed the third file. The third file was the document. Page 7 of the papers Marcus had brought to our dining table appeared on the screen, enlarged so the entire room could read it clearly. The asset transfer clause. The Calder Property Group. My name being quietly signed away. Beside it, Patricia's legal letter explained in plain language exactly what those documents had been designed to do. I watched Vivian from across the room. Her face had gone pale. Her eyes moved between Marcus and the nearest exit. The screen filled with one final item, a summary of the active legal proceedings. The injunction. The fraud documentation. The frozen accounts. At the back of the ballroom, 2 men stood up. They were in plain clothes, but moved with purposeful calm. Patricia had made a phone call 2 days earlier. Marcus turned and saw them crossing the room. He looked at the screen. He looked at 400 witnesses. He looked at me. For the first time all evening, perhaps for the first time in months, his face showed something completely unguarded.
Fear.
Vivian was already moving toward the exit. One of Marcus's associates set down his drink and walked away. Another reached immediately for his phone. The room was not chaotic. It was watching. The next few minutes moved quickly. The 2 men reached the stage and spoke to Marcus quietly. He looked at the room. He looked at the screen.
He looked at me.
Vivian was gone, gathered herself and disappeared without a word since the recordings had played. 2 men Marcus had been laughing with earlier were very still, consulting their phones. A major investor whose name appeared in Monroe and Associates documentation set his drink down and walked away, without speaking to anyone. I stayed where I was. I didn't move toward Marcus. I didn't speak again. There was nothing left that needed to come from me. The documents had said it. The recordings had said it. 12 months of quiet attention had made it all clear enough. Marcus stepped down from the stage and walked toward me the way someone walks when they have run out of all other directions. He stopped a few feet away. His face was the color of the white flowers on the tables. "Ashley," he said.
"Just my name."
I looked at him steadily.
You thought I would beg, I said.
A full second of silence. I was preparing. I turned, walked toward the exit, and did not look back once. Outside, the October air was cold and clean. Nadine was already on the pavement, her coat folded over one arm, watching my face as I came through the doors. Done, she asked. Done, I said. We stood there without speaking for a moment. Through the tall windows above us, we could see the lights of the ballroom and the movement of people, the contained chaos of an evening no one in that room would forget. I watched it the way you watch a storm from inside a dry building. Then Nadine linked her arm through mine, and we walked to the car. I didn't cry that night. I had expected to, and I was surprised to find instead something much quieter, more complete. Not happiness, exactly. More like setting down something very heavy that you had carried so long you forgot what it felt like not to hold it. My phone rang twice. Marcus. I didn't answer. It rang again from his mother's number. I silenced it. Patricia called at 11. I answered. The injunction holds, she said. Based on tonight, the witnesses, the documents, the recordings, the timeline moves strongly in our favor. Thank you, I said. I meant it from somewhere very deep. What followed was not fast, but it was steady. The legal proceedings took 4 months. I won't walk through every detail because some of it was exhausting and some was painful in ways that had nothing to do with anger, more like grief for the years I had given to something that hadn't been real for a long time. But the outcome was clear. The court found that Marcus had obtained funds from me under false pretenses, constituting financial fraud. The Calder Property Group registration was blocked. All Monroe and Associates assets within my co-investor documentation were ruled to belong, in part, to me. His accounts were frozen during the proceedings. His legal fees were heavy. 3 major clients withdrew. Monroe and Associates did not survive the investigation and was dissolved. I received the house, purchased partly with my personal savings before the marriage, and therefore protected. I received my $45,000 back with interest. I received a formal settlement reflecting my original co-investor stake and 6 years of asset growth. I walked away from that marriage with more than I had brought into it, not because I was ruthless, because I had been careful, and because I had never once confused love with powerlessness. Vivian left Marcus before the legal process was halfway through. I learned this from Nadine. Vivian had appeared somewhere warm and coastal on social media, with someone new. Every photograph connected to Marcus had been removed from her profiles. Every tagged location deleted, as if he had never existed. I was not surprised. Their relationship had been built around access to resources that no longer existed. Once the accounts were frozen and the company came under investigation, there was nothing left. She had not loved Marcus. She had loved what he appeared to be building. And the moment that structure cracked, she was already facing a different direction. Marcus called me once more, about 6 weeks after the gala. It was a Sunday morning. I was on the porch with coffee and a book when my phone showed his name. I looked at it. Then I declined the call, set the phone face down, and went back to my book. I didn't block his number. That would have required a kind of active energy I no longer wished to spend on him. I simply let it become a number I didn't answer. That felt like exactly the right proportion of response. Not anger, not bitterness, just distance. 8 months after the gala, I moved into a new apartment on the other side of the city. 7th floor, east-facing windows. A kitchen that caught morning light early. I had chosen it myself without asking anyone's opinion, a small thing that felt important. I painted one wall a deep sage green. I bought a couch without worrying if someone else would find it comfortable. I got a plant that turned slowly toward the light each week, and I found that I related to it. I started sleeping well again. Nadine came over most Sundays. We cooked badly and talked for hours about things that had nothing to do with Marcus or courts or fraud, just books, plans, things that made us laugh. I returned to my work with fuller concentration than I had managed in over a year. I was a senior project manager at a firm that designed public spaces, and I had given that work far less than it deserved while living in survival mode. I gave it full attention now. I didn't rush into anything new. I wanted to know what quiet felt like when it was simply mine. No watching, no bracing, no waiting for something to break.
I was still learning that.
But I was learning it without fear. I heard news of Marcus 10 months after the gala through a work contact who mentioned it at the end of a conversation. He was no longer in property. The industry was small, and what had happened at the Meridian Awards had traveled fast. He had tried to start over in another city, but the fraud findings were public record. They followed him. The contact said he seemed diminished. I sat with that word for a while. I didn't feel the sharp, hot satisfaction I might once have expected. What I felt was quieter, a settling. The kind that comes when something finally resolves into the shape it was always going to have. I thought about the woman I had been 11 months before that October Tuesday. Lying awake at midnight with cold tea and 3 words on a stranger's email. Tonight was perfect. I thought about choosing documentation over panic. A lawyer, a pen cap recorder, a green dress over begging a man to choose me. He had counted on my love, making me passive. He miscalculated. I closed my laptop and poured fresh coffee. He didn't lose me when he cheated. He lost me when he decided I had no power. He was wrong. I walked away with everything that was always mine. I took it back.